Hey everybody, I'm Miles,
And I'm Austin.
and welcome to the first episode of Table Talk. Today we're going to be talking about what we learned in D&D, and we'll be talking about player backstory and how extensive it should be, and then we'll have a final segment where we talk about separate tabletop games. Today we'll be talking about a game that Austin introduced me to earlier this week called Weave. To start us off, let's discuss last week's session, Austin.
So I run a D&D session, 5e. I've been doing it for 15 sessions now. And usually I like talking to people about what I learned in it. And so this week, long story short, my players were fighting a giant monster, and one of them rolled a nat 1. Everyone knows what a nat 1 means. It means something bad's going to happen. But instead of doing something to the weapon or something physical or something like that shatter the weapon, it's a singing sword, and it stops singing. And it was something as subtle as that really wouldn't really affect anything, but my players were devastated by it. They almost had tears in their eyes.
Well,
seeing this sword. Oh, good.
Let me add, I was at the table, guest character for this session, and I found it really interesting that I'd never seen a critical one do something like that. Typically, as a player, you think a crit one is going to give you like, I'm going to hurt my friend, I'm going to hurt myself kind of effect. I never thought about using it in a more dynamic sense of, like, rendering and that's very, very much an aesthetic effect of that magic weapon. Rendering that useless, and to see the player's reaction, because I'm an outsider to that group. It's a fun group, but I'm a little bit of an outsider to it. Was very intriguing.
Yeah, because with that, like you were saying, one's traditionally with the group means that they damage one of their friends. They've had, I want to say, 5 or 6 times where they've shot their own friend, and they're like, "Oh, I'm so mad at you," and then the emotion stopped. I wanted to go for something a little more emotional with it, so that's where the sword stopped singing, and just seeing the look on their faces kind of made it all worth it. It's kind of bad to say, but made it all worth it. But like knowing that later on down the line, when I reintroduce that singing sword and it actually sings this time, is just gonna make him so much happy. Like, it's just gonna be such a peaks and valleys from this whole ordeal.
Are you thinking it'll be more of a rolls a crit 20 and the voice comes back, or are you trying to feed it through the thread it through the narrative?
I was gonna think of maybe having like a side quest or something, because how he got this sword is he stole it from a god, right?
Oh.
So I'm thinking of maybe having him go back to that god and like ask for help, or maybe it's a side quest, or maybe it's that he rolls a nat 20 and all of a sudden it sings for like a moment and like says like, "Help me," and then it's just like, oh, like I gotta go help this magic sword. So I haven't really thought of it all the way through. I mean, I have like a couple weeks to figure it out. It's just not gonna sing for a while, which is gonna be, the saddest part about it. But the song is really annoying that it sings.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I am very happy it's not singing for now, because it does it just screams. Like, it doesn't even really sing. It just screams like nonstop.
I mean, if any of you have seen the internet meme, it's I forget what it's called, but there's like
it is
these like mountain men singing. They kind of.
It's called too.
I mean, to do a really bad rendition of it, it's like just a lot of that.
Yeah,
and
it's really bad.
Austin goes the extra mile of literally just.
I literally just play
Play
an
that.
hour-long version of it, and I just
At the
jump right in the
table.
middle and just play it. So
Right. You typically stop playing sorry to at you
Oh, good.
mid-podcast, but you typically stop the music to play that. I think a better way to implement that in the future will be like open a new tab, open that song, so that the ambient music doesn't
See,
go away.
Yeah, because I've tried doing that, and I have done it before, but it was like, for the last session, like I wanted all of the like recognition to be on the sound, so that's why I paused everything else. But on top of that, like, it was just like really time consuming to go and like pull it up, because I didn't think that I needed to pull it up. So it just, yeah, like in the future I'm gonna leave a lot of ambient music in the background and just kind of subtly put it in. But
Okay.
so that's what I learned from my session. Session's called Ruru Pomegranate. Don't judge me. It was.
Sure, you mentioned why.
It's the safe word
It's a safe
for
word.
the group. they get into a lot of situations, and we're like, hey, Ruru pomegranate's our safe word. No. First it was like Ruru is our safe word, and then they're like, hey, pomegranate's our safe word, and just Ruru pomegranate.
Right.
So kind of,
That's a good safe word.
It's a very long safe word,
Yes.
but I mean it works.
That's what makes a safe word good. It's got to be distinguishable. You
Yeah,
know.
like my safe word is pineapple.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I forgot you actually have one of those. That's lovely. One of the lovely things about relationships is
Yeah.
you form safe words. That's kids.
I mean, we never use
it's new
it, but
third
like
base.
kids, when you get old enough to make a safe word,
That's when you know you really love someone.
that's when you know. We don't even use the safe word though. That's the funny thing is that we don't even use it. We just know we have it in case we need it.
That's fair. If anything kinky ever happens.
Yeah.
Now you got me thinking that's like, you know, cleric, like power word. It's like
Mhm.
safe word pain or something.
Power word pineapple. You're like, whoa. Okay. Anyways, but
Yeah.
the other thing that I really learned from the session, and we've talked about this before, you know, out of podcasts, but
Mhm.
just having a good group dynamic where you can talk with each other and feel like you're connected with that character is everything. Because
Yeah.
I have usually about 5 people at the table, down to about 3, and every single one of them can turn to the person next to them and talk to them. Because we've played in games where you didn't have that. Like, you were friends with them, but your characters weren't friends, or stuff was going on out of game that it was affecting in-game that just didn't make it more fun. So
Right.
I think having that group dynamic, like, in any session is really nice to have.
Right,
So-
and whether that comes through, I mean, I feel like it has to come through with the characters, especially in the more serious roleplay groups. I imagine you start a new game with a bunch of new players, they're all just going to be friends and murder hobos, and that works well because
You gotta
there's
love murder hobos.
yeah, it works for an early session. But once you get into the more serious stuff, you want to actually do some roleplay. It becomes really hard when you've all kind of made your Mary Sue. And it feels like you're in control of the game, or if the DM gives you some undue attention. We had a campaign recently. I mean, you were a part of it.
Yeah.
Where, you know, personally it affected me a lot because I was sitting there at the table with my friends, and because of the character I had made, I came in later, so I also felt alienated because of that. Because of the character I had made, I had become alienated from the group. So not having that good dynamic really ruined the entire experience for me. It made me, you know, not interested in what was going on. It takes you away from the table. So if you don't have that good group dynamic, it's not great. It's always scary.
Oh, like getting into a new story or even like a story that you're making is always scary because you're always worried about how am I gonna mess this up or what if my character doesn't mesh well. Like all that stuff is just really, really nerve-wracking. Right?
Yes.
Especially when you're joining a new group and stuff. But yeah, I mean, just got to make sure that you're at least open with people around you, even if you're not open like in character.
Right.
Just being open enough, and on top of that, like kind of letting the group kind of run its course. Because we've had friends in the past that really want their character to be a certain way, and even when things around them change, like recently, we had a character and she was basically, you know, a princess, like a very rich princess.
Oh.
And everybody went out of their way to help her and to be nice to her and like help her out. And
Do you think it's okay if we say the character's name?
probably
Okay, we won't.
maybe no. I mean, because we can probably say the character's name, but maybe not like.
Oh, I wasn't gonna say the player. No.
Oh, okay,
No,
yeah.
no, absolutely. The character's name is very, very fun name actually. That's why I wanted to bring
Oh
it up.
yeah, I see.
It's Gloriana Cross. Pronounced Gloriana Cross. So.
It was such a great name, but as soon as
Yes.
they like cross, we're like, oh.
Oh no, this is going bad place.
But anyways, so she got stabbed in the legs and like paralyzed, and we went out of our way to find her a wheelchair and to try to heal her and stuff. And she was still as stuffy as ever, and that made all of us just not want to be around her, and really hurt the table dynamic.
Yes.
So I think being a little open with how your character is going to change, because people change, characters change.
Yes.
Like you can't have them being played a one way and just keep it that way forever.
They have to grow. They have to grow, and that's the inherent issue with murder hobos is they never grow. They
Murder hobos
maintain.
just murder everything because they're murder hobos. Like,
Yes.
that's what they do.
Which I also want to mention, Xander Megas Blaze.
Yeah, that's-
My character. I feel like a lot of the group felt that my character was the one that was problematic at the table, and I see it. It's like he was very aggressive, kind of ran the table a little.
Towards the end, a little bit,
Yeah.
because our DM had made a very intricate system of like a tower and stuff, and
Right.
you just charged on through it and didn't like let him like play that out, which I think made him a little bummed
Yeah.
out, which made everybody else a little bummed out since we really felt bad for him.
Well,
So-
and he had directed us to the tower, and it had become a thing where my character had become this guide, basically. I was almost an NPC to a lot of degrees,
Yeah.
and it was just
I
there
didn't
was a
think
lot
about
of
that, yeah.
stuff going on in the background that really didn't need to be there. There was a lot of pre-writ story, which is like a real issue. You never have your players be a key proponent in your world's factions or stories. And if a player asks you, can my character be a part of this world? Like, can they be a member of this faction? And you're gonna have this faction be the big betrayer faction, let's say at the end of the session. Don't let them be, or at least really outline with them, sit down, really outline with them beforehand what level of control. Are they going to have a card-carrying membership card where they just get some like perks, or is their family line going to be descended from this?
That's because like as soon as you do that, like they're kind of locked into how the character is gonna be.
Yep.
Which again kind of builds into that whole narrative, like have a character be open. But yeah, because if you're like, yeah, you're in charge of this faction, and like, oh wait, you have to stab your friends. You're like, what?
Right.
Like why? What's going on
Right.
here? And you're like, well, you see, because you chose to like at least letting them know, or maybe like nudging them, being like, hey, you're in this faction, but you're not running this faction because you're a level 1 dude. Like,
Right, you're not
It
going to be
kinda-
significant to this faction. Don't expect to tote your family name around as like some high-ranking individual
Yeah.
of this, or like related to a high-ranking individual. Because players, when you don't expect it, they will shoehorn in their own shit, and it will get really messy really fast.
Yep. Just for some context and backstory here, Miles and I have been DMing for about combined like probably about 3-4 years now.
Yeah.
So we have a little bit of experience. We've done all kinds of different systems, and we've made our own systems.
Yep.
So
We're a little green still, but
we're still green, but between the two of us, like we've had a lot of wacky experiences and a lot of just craziness that, I mean, you guys are gonna hear about on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you guys will hear about a lot of crap.
buckle up.
Buckle up, boys.
Moving on, we're gonna go talk. We're gonna go ahead and talk about player backstory and to what extent or how extensive player backstory should be. We did discuss about how this kind of ties into the overarching. Don't let your character's backstory touch the DM's narrative. That already
Yeah, that's
shouldn't
already
be
been
a thing.
established.
One we hadn't mentioned before, and I kind of want to touch on that a little bit as we switch into this new subject. We hadn't talked about how not having a goal in the campaign
Yeah.
is difficult. And I only wanted to touch on this because in a recent campaign of ours, the character's motivation was just to kind of laundry list help the other characters. Gloriana Cross actually was, we said we were helping her get out of the wheelchair. That became the goal of the story, and that's not so much of an adventure as it is like a laundry list.
Yeah, laundry list adventures are good for like side quests, but I don't think it's good for the actual story of the game.
Right, having that be the main motivator and kind of a vague, villainous, faceless corporation.
Yeah.
You want to have a strong villain.
Yeah, or even someone that you can see and be like, that's the guy that I really don't like.
Yes.
Because that way you like establish that in your mind, and then you know what you're going after. Something like, I think this place might be bad, but I don't have any proof. Because we had no proof that the faceless faction was like the bad faction.
Right.
Which, I mean, we were like, what, 5 sessions in? And we still
Yeah.
didn't know. Like, we really didn't have a villain. We didn't have any bad. Like, we had people die, but it wasn't. But it was just random encounters and stuff. So.
Yep.
Anyways, go on.
Oh, sorry. Well, before we get too far down the rabbit hole, that was just I just wanted to touch on that
Yeah.
because we hadn't spoke about that before. We had a couple more minutes, but you wanted to move on. So
Yeah, well, I mean, I
I was trying to
I wanted to
roast
say
that.
about that, so I'm just like, yeah, I mean, ooh, pomegranate, I'm good for right now. So
Okay. Yeah.
Anyways, so
So talking about player
backstory.
backstory and how extensive should. How about I've been talking for a little bit. How about
Nah,
you?
I like you talking. So when it comes to player backstory, I might be in the minority, but I like having extensive backstories. Like I like knowing what my character was like as a kid, knowing what they were like as a teenager, turning into what they are now. Like, because I really like being able to say,
Yeah.
hey, like way back in the day, I fought off this crocodile, and now I feel like I can fight anything, and so I have like stuff to like build off of.
Well, I mean, it helps so much when you keep a secret from the
Okay,
entire party.
so my previous characters really kept all their backstories like hidden and stuff because I feel like that I'm not going to reveal my intimate details to people that I just met.
Right,
So,
which is fair. Which is
yeah.
fair.
So like there was one of my characters we had a campaign with one of our friends who we were fusions of
Yes.
like two people into one, and basically my two characters hated each other, but they were like in love with each other. Like it was a really real toxic dynamic.
Right, the two characters who fuse, just to give people a visual.
Yep. So
basically, each person, each player
each character was
role playing two characters.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it got pretty wacky at times, but
Yeah.
it was based off of
Steven
Steven
Universe.
So.
Yeah.
But my two characters hated each other, but they also loved each other because they had killed their families and villages as a fusion. But they loved each other, so they stayed fused. But it was a real toxic dynamic type thing, and it was like, oh yeah, how's your backstory? And I'm like, I don't want to talk about it. And
Right.
they all got mad at me because I didn't tell them my backstory, and I'm like, this is something that's very personal to me and very intimate. Like,
Was this the first instance of like where this trend came from? Because I know you get a lot of guff at the table about like not telling your backstory.
there was one character before this, because in your first campaign,
Yep.
I told a little bit, but
Right. I didn't think
But,
Oxford
like-
was so bad, but that was a quick campaign,
Yep,
so I
Oxford
didn't
is
think.
Zulu. Yeah, but like, well, because in that a demon had killed my family, I wanted to go out and fight that demon,
Right.
and I had mentioned that to the players, and that was like my entire backstory.
Right.
So I don't know, because
And
just kind of the narrative just kind of has been built that I have extensive backstories that no one will ever know about.
well, and this is the reason I don't like extensive backstories. I kind of like that you don't tell people about it because then it's like more up in the air whether or not that's going to become a payoff. I feel like in a lot of our sessions anyway, the players go off and they talk to the DM and they make a character, and it's kind of this expectation that the character's narrative is going to play into the campaign to some extent. So it seems like when you voice that backstory, it's like, oh, we're gonna do that. It's, oh, we're gonna fight the demon. And like I was like, that's cool that your character has that, but this is a short campaign, and I don't think I'm gonna be able to fit that in. It never came up in the campaign.
Yeah.
And I don't like having that pre-narrative because it sets expectations unrealistically, and then people kind of, especially the players themselves, they kind of feel, oh, I never got to do that thing that my character needed to do. And the typical D&D session goes on for 2 years. There's plenty of room to fit that in.
Yeah.
If you're gonna play D&D 5e and just do a
Yeah, if you're
vanilla
gonna play
game and like
forever,
really,
like-
really give it the time it needs,
Yeah.
that works well. I play really short campaigns because I don't like to DM for a long time, and
Yeah.
I like succinct stories. I don't know. That's just my personal preference. I mean, I'm new too, so
Yeah.
I'm just trying to.
Do you think that if the campaign's going to be longer, then the backstory needs to be longer? Or do you think...
No, but I think a longer form campaign works better with a more fleshed out backstory. I think also having too much of a backstory kind of locks you into how you're playing. It's like really easy to fall back on this like lore that you've written. I feel like it's a really easy pitfall for a lot of new players to like get too engrossed in their own person's backstory to the point where they're not interested in the other players' backstories at the table.
Oh, and they're like, well, back in my day, I did this, and then I really don't care about you.
And
Is that kind of what you're meaning by it?
Instead of focusing on this cool adventure we're having as a group, it's that fallback on like, well, oh, we used to shoot swamp rats back home. It's like now I'm talking about the cool shit that I did, and it's like now we're all just
team.
measuring dicks. Like,
Yeah, and it's like, oh yeah, I did this womp. Well, I did this womp. Like, yeah, like okay.
And
I
so
can agree with that.
yeah, and so the more kind of the more stuff you have from before, the more backstory you have, The deeper that hole is, the harder it is to climb out of it and start enjoying the experiences you're having at the table and shaping your character around those experiences. I think it's
Mhm.
a lot more interesting to have your character be more of a blank slate. I
Yeah.
like a character having a little bit of a backstory, just like the bio section. If you fill that out, kind of a vague, like this is where I'm
Yeah,
from.
and I think the fact that the bio section is so short is really cool too, because it just a short little, hey, I did this. This is what I'm doing. Good to go.
Right, and you could just
Because yeah, well, because I had a character way back when that like fought a lot,
mhm.
and so I like showed up and apparently I had killed like well not killed but I fought like the leader of my village and my older brother and all this stuff. Then I
Okay,
got into the table
yeah,
and I had to fight like a rat. And I was like, this isn't as cool as like me fighting all these other things. So like that part of the backstory really like hurt me at the
right.
table because I'm like, I just want to go back to like fighting everything and being so excited about this fight instead of having to like trudge through swamp waters and kill rats and stuff. So
Well,
yeah, oh go ahead, go
oh,
ahead.
we'll talk about more complex combat on a later episode. That's actually something I really want to touch on is narratively driven combat, and I don't think there's ever a situation that shouldn't be or lead to. Like if you're fighting rats, I feel like there should be that should be at least the first domino in like
Oh,
a
of like
series of
searing of
things. In my personal opinion, I think it should be more interesting than fighting rats, but
yeah.
I feel like if you want to make players fight rats, that should be telling of something else. Anyway,
Yeah, okay. I agree. So
yeah,
in conclusion, at least what I'm saying is
okay,
that um I think when your backstory is crazier than what's going to happen in the actual story,
hmm
it kind of doesn't let you interact with the story or with the players in a way that's going to be beneficial. So
okay.
that aspect of it, I would say probably less backstory is better than more extensive backstory.
Okay, but you, my understanding before you went into this podcast
Mhm.
was that you prefer a longer backstory.
So
So,
I really like long backstories. Like I like knowing my reasoning for stuff,
mhm.
and I like saying, "Hey, when I was a kid, my family did this," and just really having kind of where I am in the world. Because I don't like it when I join a campaign and it's like plop, you're there, and
Okay,
you're just popping. So I like, hey, being like, "Hey, I'm from Kiru Village, and my
sure.
father was a fisherman, and we had tales of killing this giant white whale."
Okay,
Right? And those kind of stuff I like because it's more of like a side mission type backstory where it's like, hey, I can go back to my village and I can go and finally fight this whale.
right.
It's like a personal backstory instead of being like, yeah, my father was killed by the demon that's taking over the world. I'm like, well, heck, like now I gotta go and try to kill the demon for everybody.
Right.
Like, so I like
Right.
more extensive backstories as long as it doesn't detract from the actual story.
Okay, that's fair.
So
And that really depends on who the player is. I think it's like what are you expecting at the table,
mhm.
and I guess you have to really be aware of that. Maybe even as the DM of like, hey, really, what are you trying to do here? Because there's like a million YouTube videos about like here's the 7 deadly sins of character creation. You know, because
Yeah.
D&D is becoming so prevalent now.
Yeah, it's
Um,
everywhere now, which is
yeah.
good. Like I love me some D
Yes.
and D.
But then you see, like, oh, people just want to be Kirito or something.
Yeah.
There was somebody down at the game shop who was just making Hellboy, and the DM's kind of like letting him make Hellboy,
Oh.
and I'm like, that's that's cool stylistically,
Mhm.
but when a DM just kind of lets you have your way,
Mhm.
it like it's fun to a point, but eventually you kind of want to challenge. You kind of want to like as much as you don't want to get, for lack of a better term, get shit on.
Uh,
You kind of want to get shit on a little bit because like when things don't go your way, it becomes
yeah.
more interesting.
We'll have to talk about that for another subject. But
Yeah.
just like how everything can't be good for you. Like
Right.
bad stuff has to happen to one make the good stuff more good, and two just to see how you react and how you're gonna change with it.
Right. And
But,
that plays
yeah.
into character growth. That
Yeah.
really does.
Which you and I are huge on character growth. Which
Absolutely.
we're gonna talk about that probably a lot
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
really big and really cool to like see how characters change and whatnot.
I think just going back a little bit, I think that character backstory just I like it being there. Because we had you really clearly define your side of this argument. I'm going to
Yep.
try to clearly
Go
define
ahead.
mine.
Clearly defined.
It's I really like the strong backstory. Well, I really like a backstory being there. I like it being able to be filled in. I like it being vague. And then as the story progresses and you kind of grow as your character's developing, I at least when I make my characters, I fill in the blanks of my backstory. Those vaguenesses
Um,
become more specific the more I
do
play.
you fill it in, or do you let the DM fill it in?
I try to fill it in. Sometimes I bounce those ideas off the DM
Okay.
for sure. But it's like with Slith. Slith is one of my characters. He's a dragonborn cleric, warlock fighter.
Yeah, he has a lot of subclasses.
Yeah, and because I was just playing around with this character, I wanted to see like
Yeah.
what I could get away with. Um, this character that I've made, I feel like he's really dynamic in a lot of ways. And when I started playing him, he was literally just I was trying to get a friend into D&D, and he was literally just this kind of like push and shove to get him to make player decisions, so he could become more comfortable in his own at the table and not just kind of a tag along character
Yeah.
because it was his D&D campaign. We're trying
Yeah.
to get him into it. So my guy was just supporting cast kind of thing.
Mhm.
He has no agency. He just kind of goes along with stuff. And if you try to get him to do something, he just kind of blankly stares at whatever the objective is until it interacts with him.
Yeah.
He's not in a hurry to do stuff. He's developed a lot since then. But with that kind of base model, I had nothing for his backstory. And I realized he was a cleric and an acolyte, and you have backgrounds in D&D 5e. They're very helpful in getting kind of a framework.
Which is nice to have. Yeah.
Yes. And I decided he was like a really religious figure. And then I started thinking about his religion. And the more and more we played campaigns, I would just kind of like pull something out in the role play and see if the DM like let me do it. And that has kind of shaped his backstory as it goes. Like now he's from a small village in this certain place where there's kind of this occultic religion that's where he gets his cleric powers, and there's this whole pantheon. And if he makes questionable decisions, if he makes like villainous decisions, he goes down in this like pantheon. If he makes good decisions, he goes up. And if he makes questionable ones, I roll 2d20s, and I have a red die and a white die, and the red one, if it's higher, it's a bad decision, so he goes down. If the white one is higher, it's a good decision, he goes up. And it paints how I RP him, because the lower he is on the Pantheon, the more stressed out he plays. But the higher he is on that, he gets more cocky about what he's doing, and might even do more evil things because
okay.
because he's confident that like I'm doing the right thing even though it's the wrong thing. And so the more he does this, but this came about because I didn't shoehorn him with a
Yeah, you
backstory
didn't
at
have
the
a
start.
backstory.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, to add on that for a second, so 2 characters in my campaign right now either don't know their backstory or they want me to come up with a backstory. So I have a zombie who was like, hey,
Oh, is this
I want to have
Ulrich?
amnesia. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, his name was Ulrich.
Yeah.
And he was like, hey, or he said that he would have amnesia.
Yeah.
And I was like, are you sure you want to do that? He was like, yeah. And I'm like, okay. And he has all this backstory stuff that I have told him, and he freaks out every time I tell him. Cause I'm like, oh yeah, this is, and he's like, ah.
It's
like,
I got to experience one of those
Good.
moments at the last session, and very very interesting actually.
yeah. Well, if you weren't involved in the campaign, I would show you some of the messages. Cause
Of course.
So in the first week or so, I did a bunch of mini sessions with everybody to kind of like reestablish their characters and kind of get some of their backstory.
Okay.
And so I'm thinking, what can I say and what can't I say? He was from a village, and he ended up doing a couple of questionable things, and then he got like banished from the village and all that stuff. But to find out how that plays into his backstory and how that affects his dynamic with everybody else in the campaign was just crazy. Because at first he's like, yeah, we're friends with everybody, and I was just like, oh my gosh, everyone's gonna kill me. Like just changing it like that.
Because of something he's done in his
Because
past.
something he's done in his past, but he didn't remember it. And then I have another character.
Well, no, hold on.
Go,
Just
go.
before you go on, I do want you to talk about the other character, but I just want
Yeah.
to mention how intriguing it is that Ulrich is. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it's very fitting that Ulrich is undead kind of ghoul who doesn't have his memories intact. You know, maybe his brain was kind of like rotted a little bit, or like a worm eaten to the effect that like he doesn't quite remember all his past. I think that's fitting.
Yeah. Well, and then I also introduced a flower, and there's a blue flower and a pink flower.
Okay.
And depending on which one you touch, it either reveals like a happy memory or like a sad memory from your past.
Oh.
It's kind of based off of Lucario in a movie in Pokemon.
Oh, okay.
There's like these like flowers you touch and like space goes away and like you're part of that memory
Oh.
for a second. Yeah, it's really, really Pokemon type thing. But anyways, so they found these flowers, and they started to like touch them, and then it revealed backstory. So he's looking for these flowers constantly, to try to reveal his backstory.
Right.
So, but my other character, his name is Kratos. He's a giant black minotaur
Yes.
who has sex with about everything.
Yes.
Um,
Almost a murder hobo.
almost murder hobo, but
I wouldn't say.
he
I wouldn't
kind
say
of
he is.
reels it in a little bit, and he like is only murder hobo in certain aspects, which is really what a good murder hobo is, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyways, but
He's growing out of his murder hobo.
Yeah, I mean, it still kind of shows itself when he plays with the puppets of dead people, but
Chet.
But anyways, but part of what makes him really unique is he was like, "Hey, make my backstory for me." And I looked at him and I was like, "Are you sure?" Because as we've discussed, I'm very intricate with my backstories and really tie them into everything, if you'll let me.
Right.
And he was like, "Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I trust you." Famous last words. So I'm like, okay, so I painted in this huge backstory that ties in with like other characters and stuff but they don't know it.
Right.
And so he was like, "Oh my gosh, I did that." I was like, "Yep," and you told me to make you do this. And then he's going along, and I was like, "Okay, now I want you to say this because this ties in with your backstory." Or, "Hey, you recognize this place?" He's like, "I recognize this place. Like, why do I recognize this place?"
Oh.
Like, because you killed him, or like you built this place. And they're like, "What?" Like, just adding in that extra stuff in the backstory is really cool. I think you need the right player DM dynamic to make that work.
Yes.
But
With all things.
Yeah. As with all things. But as far as Ruru Pomegranate goes, it's worked out really well, and they gave me enough that I was able to do something fun with it, and it's really not going to play off for probably like another month or so.
Right.
So,
But
just
Ruru Pomegranate is a really long form campaign, so
yeah, it could be up to like honestly, the way we're playing, it's probably going to be like a 2-year campaign.
Yeah.
Even though they're all going to be leaving eventually, like in total, it'll probably be about a 2-year campaign. So
it's really cool.
it's going to be real fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I gave you a little bit of extra time.
anyways, yeah.
Austin, let's go ahead and head over to the corner pocket.
Corner pocket.
So today we're going to be talking about tabletop alternative. You're going to hear me say that term a lot in corner pocket. In this case, this tabletop alternative has to do with tarot. It's really funny. Our friends just came back from this like really interesting spring break thing, and they all kind of got tarot crazy.
They all got
had
tarot
card
cards.
decks. And the one we're going to be talking about today is a tarot card like tabletop kind of experience. It's got a digital aspect to it too. It's called Weave.
Yeah, and keep in mind we haven't played it yet. I'm planning on getting it, but we've looked through other people playing it, and we've kind of talked about it a little bit. So take it with a grain of salt, what we're going to talk about.
Right, we have very hot takes on things. Basically, at least on my end, Penny Arcade Expo did a whole thing on this. It's almost the premiere thing. Like if you go and search Weave on YouTube, like the Penny Arcade Expo thing shows up. It's got the real banner. There's a lot of different groups that have done a lot of different things. I don't like the format they put it in at all. I think it could use a lot more editing for a lot of these. A lot of them seem like these real like Twitch stream kind of just like live experiences, and they're on YouTube, and it's like, can we just trim the fat? Which might be a contribution to why I wasn't so
into it.
Yeah, it would seem like a pretty lackluster system to me, but it intrigued me a lot at the start. I was very excited. I was like, wow, this is really cool. Because Austin just sends me this Discord message, and I'm like, what is this? Weave? What?
Yeah. And I was like, yeah, well, we should try this sometime. And he's like, click. He's like, whoa, okay.
Yeah, instantly I was like, that's cool. I'm really into tarot too, like super into tarot decks.
Yeah, I think it's cool.
Yeah, I've never like learned how to read it or have my own.
Side tangent, like we have a deck of many things, and I actually got like cards for it.
Yeah.
And they haven't used it in like a month, and it's really making me sick. But I'm like, I have these cards, just take one out and die, but just take one. Anyways,
It's a
go on,
risk.
go on.
Deck of many things is a risk.
It's a huge risk, but it's payoff. Anyways, go on.
So just reading off the website here, half tarot, half roleplay, all story. Weave is a 21st century storytelling platform for everyone. With just 2 decks of cards and a handful of dice, you and your friends can create adventures in any genre, from sci-fi to high school comedy. When combined with the free companion app, Weave provides all the power you'll need to discover new worlds, imagine amazing characters, and save your stories online in minutes. Now, from what I saw, they did kind of a Goonies thing on the PAX thing, very I'm probably gonna botch this, but like 70s kind of, adventure, high school,
yeah.
real to something that might be more current in our current pop culture is Stranger Things.
Yeah, I was gonna
Real
say,
Stranger Things.
Real Stranger Things-esque.
It's,
Which I don't know how well it'll lend itself to that. I would honestly think more of like a traditional,
yeah,
like D&D, you go out, save the princess type thing might have fit a little bit better.
and I think that's maybe another reason I wasn't super interested into it, because I kind of wanted to see more of a like let's fight some dragons
Yeah.
storyline. But the idea is, at least with the app, they have like kind of like 3 systems up right now, and there are different storytelling aspects, and each card in their little tarot deck corresponds to a different thing. And so the player class is built off of 6 different tarot cards. You scan them, and in whatever order you scan them changes how your character plays, the character that you're making like works. You're supposed to random draw these too, so it's like, I don't know if I care for that system very much, but it's also for your campaign setting as well as you do this.
Oh, I know it's for your setting too. Okay.
Yeah, so the DM's got their own phone, and I didn't see them use any dice. It mentions dice here, but I feel like there's different ways you could do this. Obviously, it's got enough room that you could implement your own system. You could develop your own thing. Each tarot card equals a different thing, and then you just play with it that way. I mean, you could even add it to D&D 5e as an additive, like just use the normal character sheets, normal character rules, and then, I mean, we discussed specifically kind of using it for random encounters would be really interesting.
Yeah, just like flip it over and like, oh no, it's the owl, and you're like, is it an owl? You're like, oh, just you wait. You're like,
right, and it could be some weird kind of like, I don't know, astral owl or some weird stuff. But the idea there is that I think what's really intriguing about that is tarot cards are very much a denotation of fate. And so these are random encounters, but it's like, ooh, it's fate.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I really like the aesthetic of that.
Yeah. And I mean, the cards look really cool too.
They do.
Like that was a huge thing for me. Is I'm like, oh, it's gonna be. I was like, oh my gosh, these cards look awesome.
The design is modern, but it's like almost simplistic, but it's very visually appealing. Maybe we'll if we make a thumbnail for this.
Yeah, we'll thumbnail
we can
or something.
Yeah, some kind of thing in there.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention here another mechanic of Weave is that it has these challenge cards. I could not sit through the 2-hour penny arcade thing for
You're
it.
like,
because it was 1 hour of setup, and I don't know. Every time I tried to jump around to see where the mechanics were playing, and it was just them.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you're watching Critical Role, which, don't get me wrong, I love me some Critical Role. In fact, it was on today, and I missed it.
Sorry.
But no, I wasn't really I've kind of fallen out. But anyways,
okay.
But when you jump in between Critical Role, you can skip 5-6 minutes and nothing's happened, and so you jump until you're like, oh, I want something to happen, and then it's they do maybe about 3 or 4 really big things during the session, and the rest of it is just role play, which I love role play at the table.
Yes.
But when you're trying to find out what happened, kind of a clip notes of what happened during the session, you can't, because you got to jump through the whole thing and actually watch it.
Right.
Find out what happened. So not it's a bad thing about them, but.
Right. The only way I've been able to watch something so long form about that, because each episode is around 4 hours, is I'm playing. There's 2 games that are my go-tos for kind of I can do other tasks or pay attention to other tasks while I'm playing them. Dark Souls, because I've played it a million times, and Monster Hunter, because literally you just fight monsters, so there's not a lot of there's thought involved, but it's not the same kind of brain cells that you need to listen to something. So you can I listen to audiobooks a lot while I play both those games, or podcasts, and so I was able to get through some Critical Role. It was actually really fun when I did it that way. But just trying to pay attention to it, it's yawn.
I used to sit down and watch it. When you're watching it live, it's different, but watching a YouTube, you're just I have so much other stuff I could be doing right now.
Right.
How about I just listen to some podcasts because I really like me some podcasts now.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, Critical Role is it's gonna be available later, and they even do
Yeah.
a recap on Geek and Sundry. They
Yeah.
literally do a recap. We strayed a little bit far from Weave,
Yeah.
but I do.
Circle back in a second. Go ahead.
I did want to mention that the Adventure Zone, the McElroys, uh, D&D. Well, now it's more of a tabletop podcast.
Mm-hmm.
The McElroy's podcast, the Adventure Zone, is and if you don't know who the McElroy brothers are, look them up, I guess.
Look them up.
They did the Adventure Zone, and Griffin McElroy, he does a really good job of paring all that content down. He does a excellent job, actually, of like their campaign sessions are. I would imagine they're around 2.5 hours to 3 hours long, and each episode is only about an hour. Just because he cuts out all the rules kind of stuff, and the combat, everything else, he goes through and he really edits it. And I think that quality control is like really telling of how much. I mean, he's really dedicated. But
Yeah.
I mean, how hard would it be to hire one staffer on the Critical Role?
Yeah, especially when
to-
they have so many people who would want to do that.
It's a high production.
It's a high
Yeah,
production.
yeah. So I don't know what their budget is, but like, I'm just surprised that Critical Role doesn't adhere to that same.
But I mean, I don't see why they wouldn't, because part of it is just hearing the people talk, I guess, because you're like, oh, that's the voice of McCree. Go on, talk some more. Talk some more. So
Maybe
it's not-
maybe they're just trying to do a naturalist thing,
Yeah,
which
that could be, which I mean, you know,
teach their own.
to each their own.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Circling back to Weave.
Yep,
Yeah,
back
sorry.
to Weave. So one thing that really drew me to Weave is that the fact that there is the app, and that one of their big things is that every story is going to be different because of the order that you scan the cards, and just the way you do it is going to be different every time. And I thought
Right.
that'd be kind of cool because it talks about how you can make a short session very fast,
Right.
and so you can just scan about 6 cards, and then you have your character, and then start going down the path and find out what happens. And I thought that was really cool, especially with our type of friend group who like maybe don't want to commit for a huge long campaign. That it's like, hey, I want to hang out for a night.
And do
Like-
some role play stuff.
Yeah.
We talk about like Everybody's John and that kind of stuff all the time.
Yeah.
For Sherlock's and a Vampire.
Yeah.
There's all these these silly games that like lend to like a one night session that would be like really good. And I think Weave would be an excellent system to use there.
Yeah.
But my takeaway from the Penny Arcade Expo, and I don't know if like I don't want to talk bad on them, but there were a lot of technical issues. First and foremost, I feel like it's a game that after you've played it once, set up super quick after that. Like everybody understands how to do it, and you just do it.
Mhm.
But the learning, I think, would take just as long. So like your session 0 would
Mhm.
take just as long as any normal.
Session 0, like if
Yeah.
you're new to D&D,
Exactly.
how long? Like even if you're experienced, making a character takes so long because
Yeah.
you're like, gotta get my equipment, gotta get my feats, gotta get my backstory, like got all the stuff you gotta get.
And there's a lot of information. I don't think that's conveyed on a smartphone very well. I think I'd rather have a sheet in front of me. Because I looked at what they were doing. They had, in this Penny Arcade Expo thing,
Yeah.
they had this, total sidebar to the screen of being one person's phone playing Weave.
Well,
And it was like, typically it was a DM.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you can see it here. Oh, shit. Well, yeah. See all those tabs?
Yeah, so
Like
it's just tabs.
it's not a mess. It's not bad UI design. Honestly, I'm a graphic designer. I know a little bit of things about
You know
design.
some things, yeah.
But it's not groundbreaking or innovative in any way that like it's like super easy to navigate either. And I just imagine you have all these freaking abilities for your character, and
Yeah.
like having
gotta
to switch
scroll
between
through all-
those and everything else and scroll through. Like it would just be a pain. It would just be a pain anytime you saw something. Or you needed to go back to something just to reference it. It would just be
So you're like fighting a lion, and you're like, okay, can I talk to lions? And you just like scroll all the way down. You're like, nope, I can't. Okay, go back. It's like, pull out your
Right.
weapon. Got to go all the way down to your weapon.
what does my weapon do?
Yeah, you got to look at your weapon. You got to go all the way back up to see how much damage.
Yeah.
That part of it feels like it would take a while. But like you said, I think once you got the first one down,
Right.
like the next sessions would be easier, which is the most case in most tabletop is after the first couple of sessions and you're good.
Yeah, I mean, like when we played D&D with Ruru, the last session.
Yeah.
I felt like everything went lightning fast, and I'm always thinking about how can we make the D&D combat system a lot faster. and it really just lends to knowing how your character plays and really playing to that, and not trying to overthink your strategy. Think about your strategy during other players' turn. Think about your strategies before you come to the table. But I've just always had this issue. So Weave's like toting, hey, you get this like really fast role play combat system, whatever, and then I'm watching them play, and I'm like, man, this is painstakingly slow. I don't.
Okay.
I think they've failed in their mission where they think this system's really quick. But the learning curve to it is maybe that was
Maybe a little too
it being a
much.
session 0 kind of thing was
Yeah.
like where it was kind of sluggish.
Mhm.
But I think that also depends on your players, honestly. Like I don't think any game system can take out the slow of combat because there's a learning curve for some people. I still learn things constantly about D&D 5e even.
Yeah,
of,
like you're like that's a rule, or that's like you're
Right.
constantly finding new stuff about it.
Right, and I think we have a couple of choice players at the table who take a little too long in their turns, and I think you just can't bake that out of the players. So like, no matter what you try to do in terms of like innovating the system, you're always gonna have that.
Because one of the nice things about Ruru, we're gonna talk about Ruru forever.
Yeah.
But is that they are pretty fast with combat.
Yes.
Like they know what they want to do, and they're not thinking it all the way through. And as soon as it's their turn, they're like, "Boom, I'm doing this," and it's just so nice.
It is. Because I don't feel like I'm having to wait forever for my turn.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, it's my turn again? Like,
you're like, I get to go. Yeah, because we have characters who it's their turn. They're like, okay, it's my turn. Okay, look at all these spells I can do. Okay, how close am I to that guy? And it's like,
yeah.
like just throw your spike or something.
They're overthinking it, and I mean, there's a little bit of, and we've really strayed from the Weave conversation here, but I think we've said what there is to say about Weave.
Yeah, we'll circle back here in a second.
Okay.
But go on.
The thing about combat in that sense is that you get it in your head that you have to be as tactically sound. People. I hate it. People really want to make like these min-maxy characters so that they can like play effectively.
Yeah.
I don't mind having an effective character, but you really only need 2 good stats for that.
Yeah.
When you get to your turn and you're asking like, how does my spell work, yada yada.
Oh, and you're like, oh, I don't know how this works, and you're like, you've had your character for a year now,
right?
And you don't know, or at least write it down.
Right,
Like,
or how close do I need to be to them?
Yeah.
It's like we've been playing for so long now. How have you? I get that this is a new character, but it's not a new concept. Like spells still work.
Or you're like, do I add my strength to my damage? Yes.
Yeah,
every time.
And that's
that you
painful.
hit before then, yeah.
That
is
is
like having to help them out. Like, I don't want to talk about people who can't like add up fast or can't do this, but just
right.
like having to repeat stuff over and over and over kind of takes it out of you. To a point. I mean, it's just how it's gonna be.
Where is strength added? Where is this added? Where does this modifier play into it? I mean, for the longest time, I had attack and damage confused. I've started calling it strike. Like, even though it's like written as attack everywhere else, I verbally say I verbally say strike. I'm like, I'm going to attempt to strike this opponent because to me that just makes more sense than attack. I don't get it confused with damage because I've played plenty of MMORPGs where attack is damage.
Yeah. And
so
it's like, okay, strike. I mean, that actually makes sense. I might have to start calling it that just so it's easier for everybody.
Right.
Because you're like, I'm gonna try to hit this thing. I'm gonna try to strike this thing.
I hear to hit a lot at the table. I hear to hit. Yeah. It's like, I'm going to like roll this and add my to hit instead of attack. I'm like, well, why isn't it just called to hit? To hit doesn't vocabulary like it's not grammatically like intelligent. Like is it?
Yeah.
It kind of sounds. It doesn't fit in a lot of places. When I was developing one of my systems, I was putting to hit in everywhere, and it was like it sounds weird.
Yeah, it just sounds weird once you keep saying it to hit.
Yeah,
like
but strike sounded awesome, and I'm like that really different. I feel like strike and damage is a real differentiation. But that's that's just what works.
Yeah, that's
for me.
So, circling back to Weave.
Yes.
I feel like it'll be fun to do because I'm gonna plan on getting it here soon.
Oh, are you? What's the cost?
It's $50
for just the deck.
For just the deck.
How big of a tarot deck?
I want to say it's 23 cards.
No way! It's only 23 cards for $50. $50.
$50.
22 story cards.
22 story cards.
56 challenge cards, and
6 dice.
What do the dice look like? It doesn't even show the dice.
They're just D6s.
Okay. Why are they custom? They just have like the style.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
They have weave symbols on them. So I mean, for 78 cards, and it's $50 and you can use the app. Like I feel like it's something that I would use
I was gonna say,
enough.
I feel like some of that cost is like you're gonna use the app, and we developed the app.
Yeah,
We need to make
like,
a little bit
use
of
the
money for
app.
the app.
Yeah.
Because a card game, like literally, like as many cards as they're asking. I understand they have to make their own graphics and everything too, so that's gotta come into the cost.
Add up a little bit.
But the like cards don't cost that much.
Yeah,
like a
card.
card, a lot of the price you're paying for is the development. The card itself is like maybe
pretty cheap.
$10 or something
Yeah.
for this many cards.
So anyways, but
Sorry.
so I think we'll have to readdress it after we ourselves have played it.
Okay.
And so for now, I'm gonna give it, like, if I was gonna give it a grade, probably like a B minus.
Okay.
Just looking at it and hearing about it, but I think we'll have to readdress it once we actually try it ourselves.
Yes,
So-
I think that will be a lot more educated in that
Instead of
case.
being like, I think it's this. It looks like this. We can be like, this is how it is, at least for us.
Right. Oh man, I think it would be really interesting. I'm just gonna put this out there since we're talking about weave and tarot cards and everything else. The tarot deck is comprised of cups, staves, wands, and swords.
Mm.
I think it would be really interesting to make a fate-based boss, maybe some kind of avatar of justice or some kind of god being,
Ooh.
and then instead of rolling dice, you have the standard tarot deck, and like you just kind of take the swords, cups, and wands and everything out, and don't play the standard tarot cards. Like maybe for narrative reasons, I don't know. You could probably like really get complicated with this, but I'm just thinking like you draw a sword card and it's a 7 of swords. Whoever their target is, it's like it does 7 damage to that person.
Oh.
And then if you like play a like 8 of wands, you have written down like what spell that correlates
Oh,
to.
so it kind of be like a wild magic surge type effect. How it's
Yeah.
like just random.
Yeah, but you're using the cards instead.
Ooh.
I think that would be really
See,
intriguing.
I think it'd be cool to do that, but instead you give like, I don't say like a deck of like gambits and stuff, but like for like a warrior, you give them ones that mostly deal damage.
Okay.
And then you deal like mage, you give them that do mages, and like again like.
Oh, so maybe you make it this like weird set of enemy types in maybe a certain region. They're like the fate monsters, and like one of them just has the whole deck of cards, or sorry, deck of swords,
Yeah.
and maybe like death. That's card 13. Maybe emperor. Maybe those do some like different things, but they're like that guy just does like all the smacky stuff, and there's another
Yeah.
one who does all the.
Or I mean,
spelly stuff.
you could even have places where you could make these cards or like buy these cards and like you put those in your deck and during combat you
Oh.
start fighting like that.
So they're almost like spell scrolls.
Basically,
They're like these
yeah.
fate spell scrolls, but they do a certain effect. That's
That would be fun.
really good. All right.
We're gonna have to put a pin in this
Yes.
and talk about this at a later date because we are basically all out of time.
Yes. Thank you for joining us on Table Talk. I'm Miles,
And I'm Austin.
and we'll see you next time.